Welcome to the Guild Tremor video strategy guides. I'm Danton, and today I'll be covering the Northrend Beasts of the Crusader's Coliseum. There are a total of 3 bosses within the Coliseum. There are no breaks in between. At the time of creating this strategy video, there isn't much information of the actual numbers behind the bosses. However, I'll attempt to be as in-depth as I can. Gormok the Impaler is the first boss. He has 2 main abilities that he will use quite frequently, Impale and Staggering Stomp. Impale inflicts 125% weapon damage to an enemy and causes them to bleed for around 2000 damage per application per second for 30 seconds. This is not dispellable and must be healed through. Every 15 seconds he will attempt to put another stack of this up on the tank. The other ability, Staggering Stomp, is cast roughly every 30 seconds. Staggering Stomp does roughly 9,500 physical damage to all enemies within 15 yards and interrupts spellcasting for 8 seconds. On top of these 2 abilities, there are 4 snowballed vassals that will one at a time, every 30 seconds or so, move into Gormok's hand and then jump onto a random raid member's head. They are more of a nuisance than anything, as they interrupt any attempt at spellcasting and any channeled abilities. Instant cast spells and abilities seem to not trigger their interrupts. They do deal normal melee attack damage. The snowballs will also toss off fires at random raid members, not necessarily the ones that they're targeting. Make sure to be aware of where you're standing. The basic strategy here is to have the 2 tanks taunt back and forth every 30 seconds or so. This prevents the Impale debuff from building up to a level where healing would be impossible. When one of the snowbolts joins the fight, DPS needs to switch to the person being attacked by the snowbolt, kill it, and then focus on the boss once again. The second boss is actually a set of 2, nicknamed the Tremor twins. Acidmaw and Dreadscale, which have a plethora of abilities, actually can be quite intense if you don't know how to deal with them. One of them will always be mobile, and the other will always be rooted in place. The mobile worm will drop poison gas clouds, which expand slowly, very similar in fashion to how Grabulus does in Axramus. The immobile worm will do a knockback ability every so often to any melee in range of it. The worms will switch places every minute or so. Acidmaw does only nature-based damage from his abilities. Acid Spit is one, which deals a flat amount of nature damage to a target. Acidic Spew deals nature damage to those in front of the caster every quarter of a second. Paralytic Bite and Paralytic Spray are similar in the fact that they will both deal nature damage and put a debuff on the target called Paralytic Toxin. Paralytic Toxin, which is an ability of note here, is a debuff on a target player that will deal an increasing amount of nature damage over time and an increasing reduction in movement speed until the player is entirely immobile. The other worm, Dreadscale's abilities, are in fact essentially identical to Acidmaw's attacks, except that they deal fire damage instead and have different names. Dreadscale has one attack, however, that will put a debuff called Burning Bile on a target player. This debuff will deal around 5,000 fire damage to any and all allies within 10 yards. It will also remove the debuff Paralytic Toxin. The general strategy here is to have a ranged class tank the immobile worm, and have all DPS focus on the mobile one. The only real issue to look out for is the Paralytic Poison ability, which needs to be cleansed off as soon as possible, especially if the tank gets this. If someone in the raid has the Burning Bile debuff, they need to run to the tank as soon as possible to cleanse it, and then move away from raid members to avoid additional and unnecessary raid damage. Since there's so much damage flying around here, a Paladin's Fire Resistance aura, Shaman's Fire and Nature Resistance totems, or a Hunter's Aspect of the Wild are strongly encouraged to mitigate some of the damage. The third boss is a Yeti named Icehowl. Compared to the two worms, he's quite a simple fight to execute. He has a few abilities to take note of. Arctic Breath is one, and is similar in fashion to the Frost Breath of the Sons of Hodir within Ulduar. This deals 20,000 frost damage over 5 seconds in a cone to a target, freezing them in place. He uses this often enough for a paladin to benefit from using Frost Resistance Aura, or a Shaman's Frost Resistance Totem. His second ability is called Whirl, which does roughly 6,500 damage to all players within 15 yards, and knocks them back. This is a minor ability compared to Massive Crash. Massive Crash is an ability which deals around 10,000 physical damage to all nearby targets, and knocks them back against the wall. Raid members will need to stay against the wall until Icehowl uses his next ability, Ferocious Butt. An easy way to see who he's targeting is just by the direction he's facing. After a second or two, he will jump back and then charge into the wall. At this time, the general area of where he's headed into needs to be cleared out. Just strafe left or right out of the area to avoid taking the damage, which ranges in the 65 to 70,000 physical damage range. This ability will also stun the target for 3 seconds should they survive. It also appears that if he successfully hits someone with this charge, he will gain a buff called Frothing Rage, which increases both his damage and attack speed by 50%. If Icehowl misses hitting his target, he will crash into the wall and be stunned for 15 seconds, also increasing any damage dealt to him by 200%. Tanks should keep him in the middle of the room when he does this charge. This gives the raid ample time to prepare for it and move out of the way. Once he charges, all DPS should immediately pick up where they left off and burn him down. Thanks for watching our videos. If you have any questions, I encourage you to post them in the YouTube comments section below, or feel free to visit our website at www.feelthetremor.com.